Okay.
So is this better? I moved
So
I
much
increased. Okay, so I've had my input volume at like 70% and 76, and now it's at like, oh, I had it at 50, now it's 75. Okay, thank you for that.
I found that through the pandemic, having to do the mask things, I started talking louder to try to articulate over obstructions. And I think we're maybe all doing that where we talk louder and, you know. Okay. So for the solar subcommittee, we wanted to keep the momentum that we started from the kickoff meeting on the 7th. And let's see if I can share my screen here to put it. That's not what I wanted. Give me a second here. Let me dig into that. I opened it, but I guess not. That's not what I wanted. Let's see. I opened it. I don't know why I closed it, but I'm trying to get to the best management practices here. So can you guys see that? Is that showing you my screen?
Not yet, Cynthia.
Okay.
Not yet.
Again, let's see. How about now?
Not yet.
Weird.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
There you go. It's
There we go.
transitioning. You're there.
Thanks for your patience. Okay. So we talked about a lot of stuff, but we were talking about definitions for solar energy. So we agreed that we may do some work on the sizes, although they're not as outrageous as I think when I first looked at them when we consider what they are. So Billy had mentioned that the large size, which is over 40,000 square feet, an acre being in the 43,540 range, I think.
60, yeah.
60. I always get that wrong. So, you know, that is in that realm, but still underneath that acre. And then a medium is anything 40,000 square feet of surface or less. I'm in a meeting. I'm sorry, I can't meet with you. And then the small is 1750 square feet of surface area or less. And the medium encompasses everything from 40,000 square feet down to the size of a small system. So that's a little interesting. I'm not sure.
Well, it actually encompasses down to almost zero because it really says or less. It doesn't have a bottom end. So either, I think we talked about an idea of putting a bottom end on it. And then we talked about, since it says it's a principal system, that's really more of a property
Solar
that's just
garden.
used for solar. And then we talked about the last one really focusing more on just a home, basically home or, a solar that's going to go into the building where the principal use is the building, right? That's what I remember.
Right, home or business, exactly.
I do recommend, because Whitney brought up, that some people are going to be frustrated because they're going to come in just barely under. I do recommend that instead of 40,000, we just go ahead and put an acre, 43,560, or just 1 acre, so that I mean, because often properties might go one way or the other on that benchmark of an acre. Not always, obviously, but I just feel like that might just be a cleaner number rather than 40,000. Arguably, it's just kind of random. It's close to an acre, but it's not. That's just my opinion.
Do you mean for the large scale system, like start the bottom
for large and medium? I would just change for large and medium. I would just change that boundary, that 40,000 to an acre, and that's my opinion. And then, I mean, Whitney's right. People are going to complain one way or the other, but it might be cleaner if it's just an acre. If you had an acre lot and you wanted to max it out, you would end up crossing over that threshold
Right.
unless we want that to be the case.
Billy,
I don't
good
think
question though. My interpretation of this was, there has to be setbacks with any kind of solar installment. And so my
Yeah,
guess is that a
that's it.
40,000 square foot system would be about an acre in size, but I don't
Yeah.
necessarily depend on the panels and how it's mounted. Does it on a tracking system? Is it permanently set at an angle, et cetera, et cetera? But that was kind of my thinking, was they were shooting for that acre, but with this idea.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you can't have solar covering every inch of that land.
Yeah. You know, that makes sense. I totally agree with that logic.
Okay.
Yep.
So do we want to scrap your earlier thought on that
Yeah,
so that
so scrap the thought about changing 40,000 to 43, but I'm just kind of pointing out that as medium is defined, it goes down to 0, it says square feet or less. If we decide the small one kind of change, if you notice, I think we talked about this, that large and medium talk about principal use of the lot and small doesn't.
Mhm.
So we either, to me, it's like large and medium are talking about a situation where solar is the principal use of the lot,
A solar garden?
and small is talking about a situation where the building arguably is the principal use of the lot, and the solar is accessory.
I would agree with that. I would
Um,
agree. And depending on how we discuss solar garden and what is approved, I imagine they wouldn't want it to cover every inch of an acre lot per se.
mhm.
What we also talked about was thinking about with a solar garden, maybe in the realm of special review use. That way, if somebody had, say, a 5 acre lot and they wanted to take 2 acres and have a solar garden, there would be a process, as Karen and Billy know, on the planning commission, there would be a process for this gets reviewed, it's site specific and proposal specific of what are you asking for, how's that going to look, what are all the details and logistics of that, what are the setbacks going to be. So that was something that we had discussed without circumventing the ability to have a solar garden. That's part of the discussion that we're going to have focused on a solar garden at the Clean Energy Summit. And it's something that the town is actively looking to create. But how can we support it without, I think the example that I used is the AmeriGas lot that's by the reservoir. So that's, was a family trust that owned it for a long time. We talked to them a million times. I had talked to their trust attorney about it. They weren't opposed to selling it to us. However, they had a long lease on it from AmeriGas, making a good chunk of money a month. And it wouldn't shock me to think that in the future someone would buy property for that very use and say, sure, I just want to use my entire property for a solar garden. Is that something that would be an eyesore? Is it an eyesore if you're gaining electricity from it because you're buying into what would sort of be the town's solar grid? Should it be specifically reviewed? And it's something that I mentioned to Miranda when I followed up after our last meeting, saying, that was something that the group had discussed a bit. And I like that idea of thinking that it doesn't preclude it, but it makes it go through a process that's very specific so that people understand the parameters and that the neighbors understand the parameters. So I'd like to get your feedback, Karen and Billy, what you think about that. I know Karen's going on up to the BOT. She's going to be making these decisions that the Planning Commission recommends. But I'm curious what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I think a special review is appropriate for the large scale ground mount solar systems. I think it's better to err on the side of too much review than too little for the
Mhm.
large scale system.
Yeah, I don't think we would, and I agree with you. I don't think we would be, we don't want to put roadblocks in front of solar, but that seems like a reasonable step for them to go through, not a roadblock so much as just a reasonable review. Karen, I just want to be clear. You're talking large only, right? Not medium.
I think medium too.
Yeah,
You know,
I agree with you. What
I think the
medium.
small,
What's a
the
good
small-
trigger size when we think about lot sizes? So if you think about Old Town, those are generally 4,000 square foot lot in the district, medium density, which is throughout the town in places, that's 8,000. So when you're thinking of like, East or West 3rd Street, that's 8,000. When you're looking at low density, which is generally close to the mountain residential, it's a bit of a transition zone in places, that's 16,000 square foot lots, and then up to the acre size in the mountain residential. So what do you guys think if you're thinking of it as a lot?
well, I'm thinking of it as solar, the small one being for personal use for a homeowner. I'm thinking that electricity needs for a home in Nederland could be met by 1,750 square feet of PV panels. So I'm thinking anything over that wouldn't be for personal use. It would be more for neighborhood, for the town. So that's my thought of why we would make it simple for the homeowner and for more unusual installations, more specialized installations that would support more than one property, more than one business, more than one homeowner. It should go through a special review because it is larger and there's more complications involved as far as interconnections to where that energy would be used.
Where's a good place to land for that in terms of size? 15,000 square feet, so under the size of a low density residential lot.
I think 1750, I'm thinking of a rooftop.
Okay.
So a single level of a home in Nederland, they're probably mostly all under 1750 square feet. Is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
generally. I mean, unless they really sprawl in town. I mean, wouldn't you say the footprint is, the square footage of the house because it's multi-story is higher, but like, I don't know, that kind of makes sense to me as a reasonable, especially if you consider the whatever, the 2 foot, I can't remember the setback for the fire. It's probably a reasonable maximum array size, but you're right. Like over in Big Springs, there might be places, or or wherever around town, there might be places that do sprawl bigger, where they've added, this little bump out and this bump out, and they got bigger. But I think in general, 1750 would cover. I mean, that's a pretty big. That's like a 40 by 45 foot array, which is pretty darn big when they're only like 3 by 5 panels, more or less. I mean, that's
It's very large. That's like
yeah.
90 something panels.
Yeah, I mean that hopefully there aren't too many homes sucking up that much energy.
There are certainly some in other places, but in Old Town Ned, probably not.
Yeah, Old Town agreed. Old Town and even most of town, but yeah, I think there would be very few that would need more than 90. I mean, if it's 90 panels, how many watts is that? How many?
That's a lot.
kilowatts?
That's like 33 kilowatts.
Yeah,
It's like
that's a
between
crazy amount of
30
energy.
and 40 kilowatts. And like a residential system, sort of an average residential system is more like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 kilowatts. And a big residential system is like 15, 20 kilowatts. Like a really big residential system is maybe like a little bit more than 20 kilowatts, but like, I think,
Rarely 30.
but like 30 to 40 that would be huge. That's sort of on the verge of, for if it were that's kind of in between a residential size and a commercial size. So it would be a good size for like, a business that had a big flat roof or something. They could maybe fit that much on a roof. If they wanted.
We probably, that's a really good point, and there's only a couple businesses or buildings that are even that big, but in town at the moment. But maybe we need a definition that is I think that goes the other direction. So we've got the large, solar farm, medium solar farm, principal use for those two, and then we've got small, which really is more accessory, but we probably need like, just for that really oddball commercial property, possibly, I mean, I don't know, you tell me, Whitney, something larger than 1750 that would be an accessory use just for the rear commercial, or is that just really something we'd never had, you think?
I don't know that it's not possible. I mean, anything's possible someday.
I don't know how big the system is on top of the community center. I'm thinking places like that, or the BNF, I mean,
Right.
the few building, the schools, places that are bigger.
Or for example, as Whitney had said, like if the RTD, if there was a parking garage there and there was capacity to that, or even durable panels that could be put down on the ground or, what have you, and driven over, like that would be bigger than that. Where it stands right now, that small scale as an accessory is 1750 of surface area or less. What do we do with an accessory that is more than that?
I feel like we
kind of
have to have a
flying in the
definition
wind.
in there for that.
Right. I think that may be beneficial. What do we call that? Small and a half?
Right. We also have to remember the goal of this whole exercise we're doing here is to define. We want to make some categories where it's very clearly, yes, you can definitely do that without having to jump through some hoops. So we want to just define those, like that low-hanging fruit of, yes, of course you can do that. So what are the things that, yes, of course you can do? You could, yes, of course, put solar on any house. You can, yes, of course, put solar on any business up to some size. And anything, how hard do you want to make it for anything else is sort of layer 2 question.
No, I agree. It's not that I want to make it hard, but I help with my job. I help write standards and codes, and just being super clean on definitions is really important up front. Otherwise, there's ambiguity. And I'm just saying there's no harm in maybe adding another definition. I personally think the large scale and medium scale, we need to even change how they're named and just call them principal use, and then put the word accessory in the small scale. But I think we need two small scale definitions, or two accessory definitions, and two principal use definitions, so that they just stand out for what they are, and people aren't getting just caught in the numbers and get confused as to that they're different types of systems.
Agreed.
What if we added, say, solar energy system, commercial small scale, and then had a certain size, and solar energy residential small scale? Is that going to hem us in, paint us into a corner of where, hey, I have a residence and I want a larger system than 1750, which probably is not going to happen, but could here and there.
Not until you annex some things, but
How about
Well,
like,
I mean, Caribou Ridge has a pool, right? There's a pool inside someone's home. So, I mean, do I think that somebody wouldn't build a big old 8,000 square foot house up there and, a giant solar system? It could happen.
well, I'm wondering if we don't call it commercial and residential, but we say accessory solar energy system, and then medium scale greater than 17 square feet. We don't even say commercial or residential. An accessory solar energy system, small scale, defined as it is. And then I think we even put for those top two, large and medium, we give them some kind of title before the solar that clarifies that it's a principal use.
I'd like to propose something real quick. coming from a math viewpoint, let's
Uh-oh.
do a matrix, okay? Size on one axis and the other one is function, or, you know, one is like, what did we say? Accessory use?
One's
or
accessory and one's principal.
something like that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Like, really, there's two definitions for principal, two definitions for accessory. They both go both directions with, you know, 1750 or less, and then greater than 1750. Maybe we decide on the top end, or maybe we don't. But the way that presently the principal definitions are written, it covers everything. 40,000 square feet up, and it's 40,000. It's less than 40,000 and down.
So we add
So
two
clearly, we just have to add principal use solar energy system, large
I
scale.
think so. I think we're-
Principal use
better-
solar energy system, medium scale.
well,
Because there wouldn't be an accessory level that would hit either the trigger for the large scale system or the medium scale system, correct?
Shouldn't be
So
one
large.
40,000 square
Can I
feet.
step in for a second?
Yeah.
So right now we are talking within the current regulations that solar exists. And my suggestion is let's think about what we want the regulations to be, right? We want residents to be able to produce way more energy than they need to feed back into the scale. That's part of the solution to climate change, right? So, but right now they're limited to 200%. And really financially, they're limited to about 100% of their average use. So if we want to think about these, and I'm just throwing it out there, like the small, medium, large, let's think about what do we want the future regulations to be through the PUC? Because we don't want to limit our residents to 100% or 200% of use. We want to help be part of the solution to climate change, right? So maybe
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But I don't think this limits them. It's either going to be principal use, which means that piece of property doesn't have, you know, that energy is not going to the the building on there, if there's even a building on the lot, or it's accessory, which means it's feeding the house. And then if there's excess, I don't know that we need to define that excess. And who's puts the 200% limit on? Is that Ned or Excel?
so, yeah. And
Well,
that's new.
we
It used
can't
to be 120.
tell Excel what to do. I hate to say it. I don't think.
Well, but what I'm saying is like those regulations are going to change. So like they have, right? They changed from
Yeah,
120% to 200 recently, and that came through COSA. So if we think about what we want the future to be, I guess I heard that 30 to 40 kilowatt system, you know, that could be realistic. Like we may have homeowners wanting to produce energy to sell at a benefit for them. And this kind of comes from this agrivoltaics, which I've been doing a lot of research on, but we need to think about it in a new frame and make sure that these definitions don't hurt the future regulations we want to see.
Yeah, that's why I think there needs to be a fourth definition that does exactly what you're saying. It's solar energy system accessory, and maybe it's hybrid or something we call it because it's accessory and you know grid feed or whatever you want to call it, that goes above 1750. I don't want to put a limit on it. I'm just saying we need another definition in here too.
My only concern with, say, adding principal use before the large scale and the medium scale systems is that, for say, somebody has got 5 acres of property and they want to apportion some of that acreage to having a solar garden. You know, that might benefit their planned unit development, or maybe it's, you know, larger that it can benefit more members of the town. But I wouldn't want to put language in there that hangs us up, because definitions are really important in terms of zoning.
So why don't we
And
take
when
principal
you look
use
at it legally?
yeah.
So I wouldn't
We
want to
take
say
principal use out of the first two definitions, and then all three of them apply to any kind of system, and we should put a bottom end on the medium one. So just get rid of principal use, and now we've just got
in the
it based
definition,
on
right?
size.
It's already there. It says that is the principal use on the lot. Both of
Are these
those
definitions
already
we're
say-
tied to? Are we tied to these definitions?
No,
That's the
we're
first.
not.
No,
what
we're
So
trying
we're here to
cross
discuss.
them out, cross that part out. Just 40,000 square feet of surface area, period. 40,000, more than 40,000 square feet of surface area, period, for large. 40,000 square feet And I'm saying instead of or less, go down to a point that meets the small and get rid of the principal use part. And then the bottom one would be 1750 or whatever number we pick. But then you have three definitions. You've taken the use out of the situation, so it applies to either principal or accessory or hybrid, if you will. And then you just got the limits. What do you
I
think?
wonder how the planning commission is going to think of such a large system. Because what that could mean, on another side is, I mean, and while I don't think I would mind my neighbor being a community solar garden, other people might not want that as their neighbor. I moved into a neighborhood, I want people, I don't need these big shiny panels, covering an entire lot, or the majority of that lot. And so there probably would be some people who would feel like, that's a whole lot of mechanisms to be looking at and might think aesthetically, I don't like that idea. I think having the principal use on the lot does indicate that, like, hey, this is so large, this is the main thing that's going to be happening here.
Well,
And
so does that
because
help out the 5 acre person who wants to apportion an acre towards solar? Is the way it's written meet them? Or is that a problem already?
you could have more than one principal use on a lot.
It's unexpected time to
I think they describe it in like principal buildings. I think that's the terminology. And something that Karen and Billy are aware of is we have more work to do on the zoning chapter and are probably going to be tearing that apart pretty comprehensively in the next years of looking at those specifications so that we don't have definitions that preclude other definitions or kind of route us in a circle. But I believe you can have, more than one principal use on the lot. So for example, near Knotted Root, there's those duplexes that are on a single lot. So they have two duplexes that they're building and they had to be 10 feet apart. So it didn't preclude the fact that they would have these two buildings. They were just really more fire standards that were saying, hey, you have to be a little bit apart. But I think that would take a little bit more research that I can do in terms of principal uses. And if it precludes, if we leave that definition in, if it's going to preclude anyone from doing what they want, which is to say, I have a large lot, I've got 5 acres, I want to apportion 2 while also having my home and or having 30 acres and I want to do a bunch of homes in a planned unit development and I want to be able to apportion several acres in order to allow them to have electricity, and I think that's ultimately the idea without saying that's all you can have on the lot. But then, the solar energy system, that it is more geared toward accessory structures, that something else is going to exist. There's a business building or there's a home. And, maybe that's where we gain a little more ground is doing a little more defining in that small scale level of accessories. What does everyone think?
I think a special review for the medium and large would still be appropriate.
Yeah.
I could see someone trying to get around the rules by saying it's not a principal use because I'm going to be using a very small percentage for my home, and the rest will be for a money-making kind of thing, a business of some sort. So if that makes sense.
Are you thinking like language that says allowed by special review use approval, something like that?
For the mid-size and the large. And then as far as the upper bound of the small and the lower bound of the middle, I'm not sure what that should be. And I would leave.
Here's a question. Do we really, is it the size that makes us want the special review or the fact that it's accessory or principal use? Maybe we don't really care if it's principal use or accessory. Maybe we just care about the size. because it's the size the neighbors are going to care
Mhm.
about, not.
Mhm.
So
Agreed.
maybe we can just delete all of that principal use or accessory use and just say on any property in the town of Nederland, you can have 1750 square feet of solar for sure, no matter what. And if it's bigger than that, you need a special review.
Ooh,
But then
Do you
still
think,
could-
Whitney, that something
I like
that's
it.
bigger than 1750, like what Erica was saying, envisioning where we want to be. So if somebody's
Right.
saying, yeah, I want to cover my entire roof and I've got 2,500 square feet I could cover,
Right.
then should they have to go through a special review use? Or should they be able to allowed to go forward without having to go through, another process of eight people on the planning commission, not including the trustee, making their decision and recommendation to the folks on the board of trustees. That's a lot of people deciding people's fate.
True.
And so I
Maybe-
think where you can do something and say, hey, I'm able to do this, but I think that's where you're handy, Whitney, is kind of breaking that down in terms of what does that size mean?
Right.
What does that look like? How many panels?
What if
Was it
we
good?
kind of go outside of this box here a little bit, and rather than defining it purely on the basis of square footage, what if that small size was 1,750 square feet or your whole roof, if you have a building there already, whichever is larger.
Whitney, I like that idea because, like you said, as you're talking, Cynthia, like having to go through those extra hurdles is going to limit people from wanting to do that big of a system. And we just don't want that. And the reality is Excel is going to be setting these regulations. Well, the PUC for Excel is going to be setting these regulations for Nederland for the foreseeable future. And so I don't think Nederland needs to necessarily be the blocker for a rooftop array, no matter the size.
Mm-hmm.
I would only say we can't use the language cover the whole roof because
course
there's
not.
fire
Right.
code with a certain pathways and things like that. And so do we want to dial into a different size, or is there more vague language or specific language that's not going to preclude the fire code?
And Cynthia, one thing to think about is the emergence of solar shingles. Like that, I don't know about the language for that, but they're on the scene. I mean, I saw them years ago in the Alps on barns in the middle of the woods, on ski resort tops, and everywhere. Like they're coming here. It's just a matter of time. So maybe Whitney, you know more about that, but that could potentially cover the entire roof and not necessarily have a fire issue. But is that actually a panel? Like it should be, right? It's creating solar energy.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we're not breaking down the panels language in there.
Right.
But I see what you're saying.
Okay. How about roof mount? Using the term, saying 1,750 square feet of surface area or less, or roof mounted.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe just include the solar energy system small scale means a solar energy system that occupies 1,750 square feet of surface area or less, or mounted solely on an existing rooftop.
Yeah.
Right, because I keep thinking
sounds
of the solar energy system small scale as a roof mount, but that could also encompass that 1750 could encompass a ground mount as well.
Yep.
So, and I think there could be more than one roof. So
Mhm.
make that plural.
Right.
Rooftops.
Good point, Karen. Hey, in the previous slide, did we put solar shingles? Like, should we outline that as something that we recognize?
Building
Did
integrated
not.
solar is defined.
We might want to put something more vague for the new technology and things we can't think of right now that will be
That's number
invented.
3 right there. Solar energy system building integrated. That's solar shingles
Okay.
and other things too.
Okay.
But
Oh, yeah. That's a good, that covers.
Contained within roofing materials, that's bland enough.
Yep.
It's awnings. Okay. So it's really this size piece. So we want to, what I'm hearing is we want to leave the large scale and the medium scale alone, leave them as is. And then really it's about dialing into this small scale definition and how we want to address that, because that could encompass either ground mount or roof mount.
Right. And I do want to make a note that large and medium needs some sort of a tweak. It either, because right now there's small and there's medium and large, but medium also encompasses the small size.
Except that it's principal use.
Right.
With that language,
No, but I
principal
agree.
use.
I agree. Medium implies there's a small. And so maybe we just need to change the words, large and medium.
Right. Or we need to change medium somehow. What are we actually trying to get at there? Are we trying to say anything at all bigger than small is medium, even if it's an accessory use? Or are we trying to say that anything that is a principal use, even if it's actually small, still counts as medium?
Right.
I think we want to cover principal and accessory use for the
Medium. So it's just about the size. So just make that between 40,000 square feet and 1750 and delete the part about principal use.
Now I'm wondering why we have large and medium if we couldn't just merge those into two. Will we have regulations that are dependent on whether it is over 40,000 square feet or between the small and the 40,000 square feet?
I think that'll come out of our work of what we recommend to the planning commission. We're doing the heavy lifting for the planning commission and presenting to them through our discussions, what we think, which, they can take everything we recommend and say, that's great, thank you so much. Or they can say, well, we don't really like that. We want to dial in more to these things. And then really it's in their court and the board of trustees. So I think the more heavy lifting we do on this to really consider that for our presentation, the more that they understand we have torn this apart to really look at it and consider it.
At this moment, we don't know of any rules that would differentiate between the small and the medium size. We're talking about a special review for medium and small, or medium and large. So, I think before we present this to the planning commission, we'll want to have just the definitions that are necessary for the regulations that we're proposing.
And as staff, the less vague it is, the easier it is for us to carry it out. So the more subjectiveness that exists in here, and again, it's a balance, right? Because if we dial in too much, we're going to miss a segment of the population, or they're going to have to come back and say, well, I don't really fit in these parameters. So now what do I do? Now I come back for a determination of use at the planning commission for them to add another definition. Obviously, we're trying to think of this moving forward with a lot of unknowns and use our crystal balls to figure out what is the future. And that's the fun of planning, and what could exist so that we're not going to create definitions that within the next 5 years become obsolete.
I don't think you're understanding me.
Okay.
I don't think we want definitions that we're not using in the municipal code.
I think what she's saying is if the goal is to make categories for different sets of rules, if we only have 2 sets of rules, we have the yes, of course you can do it, and the maybe you can do it, but you need a special review. Then what's that third definition that we're making? If we only have 2 categories of rules, then we should only have 2 categories of definitions.
Right. So it's either special review use or allowed by right.
Yeah.
Or if it's not named or it's outsized of what exists here, then it would be prohibited.
Well, we have a definition for, we're covering all possible sizes. We could cover all possible sizes with 2 definitions for size, but I'm fine leaving it in for now. But I'm just saying, as we're working through the regulations, we come back and look at the definitions to see if they're all being used.
I think that's an excellent point, Karen, because we don't need more buckets of categories than we have buckets of rules. And I'm curious if there is. I don't know a ton about the current rule buckets in the town of Ned. Are there more than 2 buckets? Like, is there an intermediate between no pain in the ass at all, you can definitely do it, and huge pain in the ass special review? Is there a medium? Is there a middle road there?
The 3 options are, it's prohibited.
Yeah.
Probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's a use by right, and you can do it barring any permits, licenses that you may need.
Right.
As part of that, it goes by special review use. Within the construct of special review use, because it's a specific review, the Planning Commission has 3 options with respect to their motions. They could approve, they could deny, or they could approve with conditions. So where the gray exists is, what are the conditions that the Planning Commission or Board of Trustees would approve with that specifically dialed in request per that proposal, per that property? What are they asking? So the gray is really in, yeah, we want to approve this community solar. However, we want these conditions, which they can impose onto the proposal. And we kind of, obviously we can't, that's something we can't really dial into because we don't know what those conditions may be because it's so specific to a site.
Right. That makes sense.
I have a question. Why, so if we have a large scale principal use that requires special review use and a medium scale principal use that requires special review use, why don't we just get rid of the sizes and the 40,000 square feet and just say principal use solar energy systems, ground mounted that are the principal use on the lot, blah, 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 require a special review use, and then don't even have to, make that the only definition for principal use.
So it would just
There's
be
no real difference.
definition.
We're telling them they're a different size, but like they have the same parameters, so just get rid of the size.
I thought we were going the other direction by saying
Agreed.
we want a special review for the medium and large size, and we don't care if it's principal or accessory use or a mix of the 2.
Okay.
For the small scale, you're saying.
Then that's
For the small
fine.
scale, you're saying.
I would,
For the special review.
so
Well, for all of them, take out principal use.
Yep.
If you take out principal use on the large and the medium size, then there won't be principal use on any of the definitions related to size.
which I recommended that earlier, and I agree with that choice. But I guess we have to put in there, or maybe we don't put it here, but that all, basically all solar energy mounted systems, that are for principal use, whether we put that in definition or not, requires special review use, and anything below whatever we make 1750 or whatever we keep that at doesn't.
I think what you said just before that, Billy, it kind of makes sense to me. So if something is going to be a principal use on the lot, then is the size relevant? Because if we're going to make both medium or large go through special review use, which is very specific to that proposal, that site, and all the parameters and logistics of that, what is the size, where's the location, everything is going to be so specific, we could probably wipe the sizes right out of there.
Yeah.
And just say it's allowed by special review use. And so it's like, we're not saying, hey, there's a large size, there's a medium size, both have to go through special review. In that case, there's not really much difference.
Anything ground mount. I mean, basically, the one definition that covers what Eric is asking for about allowing someone to build a huge array on their roof if they have a huge roof and not limiting it. Basically, saying that definition of fits the existing roof. That's one definition, and then the other one that would cover all these quote unquote principal use ones that irrelevant of the size, they have to go through a special use permit.
So
But then you're saying that anything that's small that's a principal use also has to go through special review. We're mixing our things again. So there's the issue of size, and there's the issue of use, principal or accessory. And if so what I think we were headed towards was, we don't actually care if it's a principal use or an accessory use. We just care if it's big.
Mhm.
If it's big, we want to look at it. If it's not big,
Yeah.
you can
Okay.
do it.
What
I don't know if we don't care about that, Whitney.
So-
Yeah, I don't.
I don't know how other people are gonna
Bill,
feel
yeah.
if it's, hey, the lot that's next to me is gonna be a community solar garden. I don't really want that. Like, I
Yeah.
think they would make a nice quiet neighbor and I'd be stoked about it, and I'm close to the power source. But some
Well-
people, I can think of a few people in the planning commission who'd be like, I don't want that next to my house. I want a house.
17
I live in a neighborhood.
At 1,700 square foot, they would still object, you think?
I'm not talking about an accessory use, so I'm not talking about that, what we have currently as a small scale. I'm
But
really talking as the medium, large,
Exactly.
regardless of the size itself.
So what I'm suggesting is that there is small, as defined as this, roughly 1,750 or smaller, or covering your roof, whatever you can fit on your roof. That's small, and you can definitely do it. Even if it's a principal use, you could put in a 1,700 square foot ground mount, and it's the only thing on the property, and you can still do it because it's small. Or if it's bigger than that, if it's bigger than 1,750 and it doesn't fit, or doesn't fit on your roof, then, if it's bigger than 1,750 and doesn't fit on your roof, then you need to go to special review, whether it's accessory or principal use. It's the size.
I agree with that.
I don't want to split hairs here, okay? Because thinking about it like a roof mounted system, most people don't have an issue with that, right? What came up more at the planning commission from some of the planning commissioners were, well, what about this ground mount? And is that going to affect vision clearance if somebody has this ground mount and it's close to their property line? So obviously it would have to heed some setbacks. And there was also the question of, is it impervious surface? And we could split hairs about that. I don't think it is. Somebody else does think it is. But there are other zoning parameters that we're going to get into regardless of these definitions, but they're going to have to dovetail, because if we just say, hey, you are allowed a 1,750 square foot surface area or less, or let's go up to 2,000. You're allowed 2,000 square foot or surface area or less, but you don't have the setbacks on your property because it's overbuilt, or you're not going to meet, depending on how we define this with impervious surface, you're not going to meet that aspect of your solar. And we're just saying, yeah, you can go ahead and do that. And I don't see the planning commission saying, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, but
Because of what's already
doesn't
come
that
up.
already have the asterisk, this area may be decreased where appropriate for jurisdictions or zoning districts of small parcel sizes? I mean, that's in the definition already. Like, if you've got a small lot, you can't just build it out to the max. You've got them, the zoning, the setbacks have to be respected.
If you have a smaller lot, so for example, you have you're in the medium density residential district, which requires 8,000 square feet, and you have a 6,000 square foot lot. You may have to go for a variance in order to be allowed to build there, and that's going to be very pertinent on what are you asking for? Is it a variance just because, hey, your lot size is too small and it doesn't meet the parameters of the district, or is it, you're going to go for that variance, but also you can't meet your setbacks because you're on a smaller lot. So everything gets tighter when you're on that undersized lot. And what I wouldn't want to do is overlook the fact that those cases exist in the town. And so if we say, yeah, you can absolutely do it, that could affect the Board of Zoning adjustment as well as the Planning Commission's thought on it. Does that make sense?
I hear you that the rules about small energy systems can't just be, yes, you can definitely do it no matter what, up to this size. There's going to be more nuance depending on zoning, lot size, etc. But that's all later. Right now, we're just trying to define the buckets so that we can refer to those buckets later.
Yeah.
It is specific in the definitions for large and medium that it's ground mount, where it doesn't have that indicator in the solar energy system small scale. It doesn't say ground
Right.
mount, doesn't say roof mount. It's just could be
Right.
either. And if we think about it, in some cases, there will be lots that will be challenged to have a ground mount. They may be challenged to have a roof mount, depending on the sun that's available to them. But, you know, really dialing into, if we just say, okay, at a certain point, if you're going to do a community solar garden, regardless of the size, you have to go through special reviews. But if you're going to have solar on your property, on your residence or your business building, that's a use by right. And we have to think of parameters that are going to be like, hey, this is a use by right, because someone's going to look at that and be like, okay, I can just do it. And it makes it challenging for staff to be like, well, in your case, you really can't because you don't meet
Can we
these
have the,
parameters.
well, can we have the solar be part of the use table? So there'll be setbacks and height limitations for it?
That might get really complicated, because it's not like we could have it in the definitions, and then in terms of use, we could, and that would get into, if we added into the use group tables, which is section 16-32, then it would get into the different districts and is the use allowed and how is it allowed? And that's where we would get into, okay, in this zoning district, is that a use by right? Or is it allowed by special reviews? Or is it prohibited?
If you can build a shed in any of those districts, you know, as long as you're not on the setback, so why wouldn't solar kind of be the same as a shed?
The challenge is not everyone calls to ask the town about it. So some people are just going to do it. They're going to be like, oh, I can build a shed. So what if I built it on my neighbor's property? I just did that because there's no permit that's required. So it gets challenging when people don't call the town to get those setbacks and to get those parameters that allow them that use by right. I don't want to make it overly arduous for folks, but I also don't want to be like, whatever, because not everyone is very considerate of their neighbors.
Well, I think we do need to have the ground mounted solar systems. We need to have setbacks and height limitations for those. I think that's going to be a requirement. I think the Planning Commission will want that. I think, you know, neighbors will want that too.
I
So,
agree.
in
So
these
just to check in,
definitions-
guys, we're at 10:33. I think, what did we have an hour planned for this meeting?
Yeah.
I just want to check in with folks and see how they're feeling. I could go longer. I don't know about anyone else.
Cynthia,
I
I've
think
got, I've got to cut
Go much longer.
meeting in a half an hour. I've got to prep for.
Okay.
I think we've done enough. Can you just summarize what we settled on for the definitions for the size and principal accessory?
Did we come to a definitive on this?
No,
I don't know if we
definitive.
did.
We've gone round and round the whole time.
Okay, I here's what I think we settled on. I think we settled on removing principal use from the definitions, those three definitions, adding a lower limit to the medium scale, and possibly changing the upper limit for the small scale,
And
then
adding roof surface.
adding roof surface to the small scale.
Okay. I don't agree that we decided to wipe the principal use off of those large and medium scale. Because I think it delineates, this is the main thing that's happening. I get that we could say it's not the only thing that's happening. I think in many cases, you know, most of the town is built out. There are some large lots where they may think, hey, this could be really beneficial. What about something that's already built, like Caribou Ridge? They're already building all these houses and they're like, hey, we could take this lot and we could cover this lot and make a solar garden. It's not our only use in this PUD. It's you know, it's a main use. So I'm not opposed to it, but at the same
Here's-
time, I think that it may give the planning commission a handhold to grab onto of saying, okay, how that's being defined is it's the main thing that's going to be happening, or predominantly
Okay,
main thing that's
For me,
happening.
I don't see the reason to have a large, I mean, I agree with what you just said. I just don't see the reason to have a large and a medium defined if they,
It's special
they're both
reviews.
principal use and they both got to go special review use. Why don't we just get rid of?
So I think I think we're all in agreement on that large and medium doesn't mean anything. There's two categories, small and not small, or
Okay,
whatever you want to
great.
call them. Is that
Would we
true?
limit it?
Large and
Would
small.
we limit a top end? Like, so for example, if we wiped out the sizes, would we limit a top end
Mm-mm.
at all? Or just say, it's all going to special reviews anyway, so there's
Yeah.
no point in limiting a top end because we
Right.
don't know what somebody might want to put on. Maybe they
Yes.
want
There's
2
no limit
acres.
on the top end presently. I mean, there's no limit on the top end presently. It's just more than 40,000. So yeah.
So,
And then,
yeah.
so, but I still want to talk about this principal versus accessory use for a moment. So do you think that, so if you are saying that large means it's principal use, what if somebody wants to build something that's over 1750 or bigger than their roof, but there's also a house? Do we need to then make a third category for large accessory use? And would the category for large accessory use be different from the category for different rules than large principal use? Would it matter that there's also a house there? I don't think it would. I think it would still have to go through special review and it would still have to follow all the rules of being big. And the fact that there's also a house there wouldn't change anything in my estimation.
But I think in
agree
terms
with,
of, oh, go ahead, Karen.
yeah, I agree with that. And that means removing principal use from the
Mhm.
larger definitions.
Yeah.
Although, what if there was something that was, so to not preclude the future and
Yeah.
say, okay, we don't know how big someone's house may be. We've got a range of houses from tiny little one-room cabins to giant houses that are getting larger. And what if we dug into the weeds more on that definition of allowing it, but it is allowed, but not by special reviews.
Yeah,
What is a good size to say? 3,000 square feet?
no,
Does
no,
that
we're
seem
just
like a
going
heck of
to
a lot?
add roof mount to the small definition.
Yeah.
So
Roof
70
mount or filling existing roofs.
Mhm.
That was how we put it.
yeah.
So we want to define the small scale with roof.
And,
What do
or
people want to do if they want a ground mount?
Whitney has
fine.
the wording. Whitney has the wording.
both. So a small energy system would be one of the following: either 1,700 square feet or less of like solar panel surface area, or mounted solely on existing roofs.
Mhm. I like it.
So
Or, I'm sorry, what was the last part of that? Mounted
something like
solely?
mounted solely on existing roofs. So that means that if you had a like 7,000 square foot house, you could put 5,000 square feet of solar on that roof because it's all on the roof.
Mhm.
Or you could put 1,750, some combination of roof mount, ground mount. You just couldn't put 5,000 square feet of ground mount.
Okay.
I think that covers everything by saying it that way. And we have two
I
definitions.
like that. So it gives us a limit sort of the size of a ground mount that if you're above 1750, then
Yeah.
you're gonna have to possibly come forward for a special review use. Is that what we're saying? But if
Yeah,
it's
and
under
it's
and or on the roof,
Mhm.
and then that gives us, when you say
not and or,
mounted
just
solely
or.
on existing roofs, then that could flux with the size of the home. And then obviously, whatever the requirements of the solar system in terms of building permitting, it doesn't preclude any of that.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah.
So it's either all on the roof or it's a total of less than 1,700 square feet, because there is some possibility of a combo. You know, somebody's got some on their roof and then some on the ground, but that would have to fit into the 1,750.
Would we, so with something like that, would we add up both their roof and their ground mount together? And it would need
Yes.
to be under 1750?
Yes,
Yes.
that's
it would
why
be-
it covers everything.
So it would be occupies a total of 1750 square foot.
Or
Yeah,
You know,
entirely
Whitney,
yeah,
that
yeah.
that seems a little awkward because, you know, you'd have one property that could have a ground-mounted system of 1750 square feet, and you could have another property, you know, that could accommodate the 1750 square feet of ground mount, and they also want to put cover their roof with panels, and the roof may be 3,000 square feet. So I like what you're saying there, but I also think it seems a little strange. I don't know if we could come up with something a little bit better there.
I mean, I think but if someone's gonna do that, then they're getting to the point where they're going above and beyond what they need in their house. And I think it warrants, I mean, personally, I think there's no harm in a special review use. They clearly have the money for one thing. And then, but more importantly, it's going to all of a sudden get more complicated because there's more going on with Excel now. It's not as simple as just offsetting net metering their house for their personal use. It's like grid tied and needs to be balanced, blah, blah, blah. So I think personally,
and all of that
I
is
like
not
the
our
two
problem.
different. What's that?
I
All
have
that
a,
Excel stuff is not our problem.
I have a Bitcoin operation going on at my house. I want to put so much solar
Move,
on there that
move.
I can cover my Bitcoin operation. I'm not selling it back to Excel,
Here's
and
my-
I want a ground mount and my roof covered.
Yeah, I know
Special
people.
reviews.
I know people like that. But anyhow, how about we say the small scale is it fits on your rooftop, and you can have 1750 square feet ground mounted. Anything
If we-
above that goes to special review.
If we did that in a use by right, there are going to be people who just do it. You know, they would go through a permitting process, but
Yeah.
it's going to put a lot more onus on the staff to be like, well, no, you actually
Yeah.
can't because you don't have enough, you're not meeting your setbacks and things like that, which I would do in a, you know, any building scenario anyway. But
So it's saying, like, defining all of that as small and putting all of that in the small bucket doesn't mean that it has to be, the rules about small have to be, you can definitely do it and we're never going to say anything bad. The rules can still be, you have to follow all the other rules. But we're just trying to define what is small and what can have like the small set of rules versus what has big set of rules.
So
okay.
and
What
I
about
see-
the last part of the definition? This area may be decreased where appropriate for jurisdictions or zoning districts with small parcel sizes. Do we
Well,
like that?
No, I don't like that, because if you say that, then you've got to make new definitions for all the different parcel sizes, which
Mhm.
we just did that and it was hard.
we're going to have setbacks for these.
Yeah,
And
There's
so
a-
that will cover it. So
yes.
let me just say one more thing about my proposed definition for small.
What about ground mount systems must adhere to associated zoning setbacks and, you know,
That's all later. This is just, we're defining solar energy system small scale means. We're not saying what that means in terms of rules. We're just trying to say, if we use the word small scale, what do we mean?
okay.
So
Sorry, Karen,
Yeah.
what were you gonna say?
yeah, so I'm looking at the three definitions, and I like saying that 1750 square feet can be ground mounted. You know, if it has to conform to the setbacks too and the heights. That's a small, and then we get to the large size is anything above 1750 ground mounted.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're looking at these definitions, the one one commonality is we have the size is associated with the ground mounted system. The roof mounted is whatever your roof will support. So
True. I like that.
So a second definition, right? So seeing as we talked about wiping the size, the specific size of 40,000 square foot above or below from the other two definitions, what if there is, so that way there's no confusion of, well, why do you have a large scale and a medium scale, but for the accessory you have a small and a medium, or small and large. So if we take out those medium scale and large scale and we wipe that out, then what about a second definition for solar energy system, and it's medium scale or large scale, or, small and large? And then that's anything above 1750 of surface area or
Yeah.
more.
So it would just say solar energy system large scale means a ground mounted solar energy system that occupies more than 1750 square feet of surface area. Period.
If
And-
we did that,
Requires
do
a
we have
special
to add
use.
ground mount to the small scale?
We would have to define, as Karen was saying, solar energy system small scale means a solar system that either A or B. Oh no, I guess it wouldn't be A or B. A small scale means a solar energy system that is roof mounted and includes up to 1,750
and
square
may
feet
include, and may include.
and may include up to 1,750 square feet of ground mounted solar.
Mhm.
And again, we don't have to put any rules at all in these definitions. These are just defining what it means later when we say the words large scale or small scale.
Okay,
And
can you repeat what
it'll
you
make
just
it
said?
Sure. Solar energy system, comma, small scale means a solar energy system that is roof mounted, comma, and or may include up to 1,750 square feet of ground mounted solar. Period. To throw a little bit of a wrench in here and get in the weeds for a second, somebody at some point is gonna get confused about square footage of ground mounted solar. Are we talking about the square footage occupied by the solar panels, or by, so ground mounted solar happens in distinct rows with a big space in between? Does that big space in between count in the square footage?
I think
Or
so.
if it does, then 1,700 square feet is actually kind of small.
Mm.
Then it's no longer, because let's say you have,
Yeah, but it's kind of small, but it's still pretty big if you're also doing roof mount. I mean, it's if you're saying it's 33 kilowatts, say it's half that, it's still 17 kilo. I mean, that's,
well, some places can't do roof mount at all, really. Usually for residential systems, it's usually a roof mount or a ground mount. We want to leave the possibility for both, but that doesn't usually happen.
but how big are your, I mean, if you include the spaces between, how big are they?
So like a 10 kilowatt PV system that's, ground mounted might be like 30 feet long, like a single row might be 30 feet long. And then if you are making another row behind it, it could be like the space in between is probably at least 20 feet. So 20 times 30, yep. You just included 600 square feet of empty space that came out of your 1750.
But then I don't think we should include the empty space personally. I mean, I believe strongly that this is a pervious surface. So,
Right, right.
I think it's
that's-
insane to call it an impervious surface. It's like pavers that you put on your driveway or your walkway or slate, those are pervious. And it's, those are considered pervious surfaces by every system I've ever heard of. So I think that we just say square feet of the system and of the panels.
Yeah, I think
Don't worry about it.
that would be difficult to measure. So I'd be more in favor of increasing the square footage of surface.
It's difficult to measure, but it's actually, it sounds difficult to measure, but it's actually not. Like each solar panel has a very specific size. So
Right.
like each solar panel is about 18.5 square feet, but that changes a little bit. But like a spec sheet for a single solar module will tell you exactly down to the square millimeter what size it is, multiply by however many times there are, or however many panels there are, and voila, that's the square footage that counts.
What about new technology?
Same thing, it'll
It's not
have
gonna
a,
get bigger, it's probably gonna get smaller.
right,
I
it'll,
think
it'll
that
have
like
a
a phone.
size.
The question is really, so when you talk about the space in between, right? I would look at that, and that really has a lot to do with maximum lot coverage of impervious surface. So which we look at like a footprint, you know, so if I think here's a main building and it has this footprint, and then 10 feet away there's a shed and it has this footprint, I'm not considering the space in between them as pervious.
Right.
And then when we
Right.
take setbacks, like if you're saying, hey, I'm going to have these rows of my solar panels, I'm going to look at what's the closest row to your property boundary. And that's how I'm looking at the setbacks. So I don't know if we need to dig into that more.
Yeah.
Would
Yeah.
say I wouldn't want somebody who could accommodate the square footage to be hemmed in by a size, so long as it's appropriate, unless we say, hey, anything more than 2,500 square feet or something, that has to go through special review use. But anything under that seems like a lot of panels.
Yeah, I mean, 1750 is almost 100 panels if you said they're 18.5
Which
square
you said
feet.
like 90, right? 90
Yeah, it's like it's
panels or
90,
so.
and that'll change over time, and it's already changing. It depends on, you know, depends on the exact which panels. They're not all exactly the same size and shape. Some of them are physically a little larger or smaller, but it winds up to be, yes, like 90 to 100 ish panels.
It's
And
about
I would think technologically, you know, we go smaller, right? We get more, we maximize the use of something that is small.
the efficiency.
Maybe in the
Yeah.
future, right, for efficiency, they're not going to be as big. They're just going to be way more efficient and even take up less space. When you think of like shingles and things like that, I mean, not that, yeah, I don't know that that's the way it'll go. That's just.
But it's
seemingly way
the
it'll go.
physical size part that's going to offend the neighbors, right?
Probably.
And it's probably not the physical size of how many rows, like that, the space in between the rows isn't what's going to offend the neighbors. It's the actual square footage of like PV glass surface.
Well,
That's
so like one planning commissioner mentioned, hey, when you have ground mount, you know, and it was more of the focus of the ground mount, you could, it's going to change the wind patterns on the lot. So you're going to have more drifting around that panel, bottom of that panel. And that could create more vision obscurance. So that could obscure the vision for traffic around a corner because you plopped your ground mount in this certain area. There was seemingly more concern about the ground mount than roof mounted systems, although the glare was mentioned, you know, we can get into those specifics. But yeah, it was size, but it's also, you know, that's another consideration, is where you're putting that panel is going to have an effect, and it'll have snow swirling around it. So even a small system could do that, right?
right. So, but that is an issue to be considered in things like setbacks, maybe, but I don't think it is important in the conversation of what does it mean to be a small system versus a large system.
Okay, so then it gets down to size.
Yes.
And it feels like, from what you said, 90 panels, do we need something that's bigger than that? You know, as a use by right for a ground mount?
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
a
that
lot
just
of
seems
panels. That probably covers it, right? That's huge.
Right. But what I'm saying is that it's only 90 panels if you're not counting the space in between. If you're counting the space in between, then it's like 40 panels.
You know,
I don't think we should be counting the space in between. And I think, Cynthia, what you said before, like if you got a house and a shed, you're not counting the space between the house and the shed. So there's already precedent set. You're just counting the house.
And we should also
and the shed.
be clear, are we counting the footprint, like the shadow line, or are we counting the surface area of the panels themselves? Because solar panels at an angle make a slightly smaller footprint than their actual surface area. I think the easiest solution is to just define that square footage as the actual like surface area of the solar panels themselves. So like having them steeper at a steeper slope doesn't mean you can have more of them. Having them at a flatter slope doesn't mean you can have less of them. Having a bigger space between them doesn't mean you have less of them.
The size of the panels,
Yes.
not
So-
I agree.
because impervious surface is something that we could split hairs on, but some of us wouldn't agree that it's going to contribute
Yeah,
to
I mean, I
impervious
think
surface.
that-
It's not really a footprint. It's almost like a above ground deck, where if it's on the ground floor, we're going to count that deck as impervious surface. If it's a second story deck, not counted, because the
Right.
water is just going to run right through it. With the panels, it's not going to run through, it's going to run off onto the ground below it.
Right.
So,
And so just in this small, I want to include in the definition of like what is small versus large, I want to be specific about the square footage definition. Square footage of what? And I want to include that the square footage that we're talking about is the surface area of the solar panels themselves. That's the square footage that counts.
okay, so what
I
would you
agree.
constitute a large scale system?
I
Same
think that
what you had said
1750
was,
I
oh,
think
go
that
ahead.
I think that 1750 is still a fine dividing line. In my mind, I've been thinking about it the whole time as that 1750 is the square footage of solar panel area, not of like, you know, the region of your property that has
Yeah.
rows of solar panels on it.
That's how I've been thinking. My guess is these numbers didn't come out of thin air. I mean, the 40,000, I think the more, when Erica said that, it's probably an acre and they calculated some setbacks. That 1750 probably, was calculated specifically for a good reason. I don't know what that is, but
So we
but
could,
I like just taking the square footage of the panels and ignoring the pitch and just square footage of panel times number of panels equals, and it can't
What
exceed 70.
I'm
Do we
looking-
need to add any kind of predicator of size then?
Yes. I mean, that is the point. We're trying to decide what is a small system and what is a large system.
Okay, what is a large system then?
It's more than 1750 square feet of ground mounted solar.
So the exact same definition, the exact
Yeah.
same language, but that occupies 1750 square foot of surface area or more.
Yeah, I'm trying to be more specific about what square feet count in the 1750 versus what square feet don't count.
I have a suggestion for
Yes,
the
please do.
terminology there.
Yep.
I'm looking at the previous definitions and they talk about a solar energy system means a solar energy, the ground mount, accessory ground mount means a solar energy system that is structurally mounted, so we could say 1750 square feet for the small one of surface area of the solar energy system or less.
Right. So
Instead of panels, we call it surface area of the solar energy system.
That to me is clear.
yeah, or surface area, 1,700 square feet of surface of 1,700 square feet of solar collection surface area or something like that.
Solar collection surface area.
I like that because I just saw the word solar collector at the bottom and I was thinking that, but solar collection surface areas even.
I think we need a definition then of solar collection.
Surface area.
Not surface area, but what is a solar collector? If we're going to use that term in the definitions, then we need to define that term.
Well, it's in the next definition, two definitions down. It's in there. Maybe we do need to define it, but it's in these definitions for what it's worth already.
Although this is where we hung up the last meeting, where when we first talked about this, we're like, oh, okay, that the solar resources gives a lot of information. It's great. It includes a lot. We like that. Although Whitney had mentioned that in Boulder, they use solar resources, like the presumption is to not shadow out your neighbors, right? So we probably have to look at the solar resources a bit more to consider how will that be wielded? Because that could maybe be wielded to say, hey, you can't prevent me from utilizing my solar resources on my property by the building that you're about to build there on your property. Right?
Yeah, so that's another issue. I think we should, if we're going to use the term solar collector, that we should define it. What do you think, Whitney?
I agree. I have to go, you guys. Thanks for
Okay.
your time.
All right. Thanks, Billy.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. So we have Melody still, we have Whitney, and we have Karen. It is 11. And are we wanting to continue? Are we wanting to break from here and we can get back into it, feeling like at this stage, what we were thinking was wiping out the medium and large size definitions so that that language is gone, because it's both by special review, so it really doesn't matter. And that we have kind of a working definition of the small scale, is roof mounted and or may include up to 1,750 square feet of ground mounted solar. And then large scale would be that definition, but with a bit more, 1,750 square feet, or more of solar collection surface area. And then what Karen is saying is we need to define solar collector or solar collection surface area.
And the large system is principal use of the lot.
Well, I think,
Did we settle on that or no?
no, I don't think so. I think we were trying to get at, a definition of what if you exceed 1,750 square feet. So most everybody is going to be under that. Some people might be above that. And do we want to allow that as a use by right? If they have the property and they're able to do it, they want to cover their roof and they want to have a ground mount and it's not going to impede their neighbors. And we don't necessarily want to have to make them go through special review use, or do we?
Okay. Cynthia, could you
Oh,
send us those definitions?
I do have to go. I guess Macy can't start the TRC meeting because another meeting is in progress. So she was wondering if I'm still running the solar meeting. So we are gonna have to take this to our next meeting. I'm sorry, what were you saying, Karen?
Could you write up what we decided for our next
Yes.
meeting? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I will. I have it on sticky notes here, but I will write it in an email and then we can pick up at our next meeting, which, what did we decide? I think we said the 20, did we say?
I think this is the standing day and time.
Okay,
Every 2 weeks.
27th. Right, we have the Clean
Yep.
Energy Summit on the 26th and then Wednesday, the 27th, at 9:30.
Yeah.
So I will send out something to summarize what we discussed so we can pick up from here next time. And I'm sorry that we couldn't continue to talk. It seems like we have one host opportunity and that's it. So thank you. Thanks, Melody. Thanks, Karen.
Bye.
Bye. It's just stop this. I am out.